Hey everyone, here is how I put together these adorable little cupcakes that went around the hem of this dress. The cupcake motif is available on my Etsy site, and all the materials along with timestamps can be found in the description box below. So I'm starting with the top of the cupcake using this adorable dotted Swiss fabric. I take my light tracing board, which yes, I do love it, and it's linked down below through an Amazon affiliate link, and I trace around the top of the cupcake. So this would be kind of the icing part, if you will. The motif has two cupcakes that kind of come together. They kind of angle together, if you will, and I'm going to call one of them the left cupcake and the other one the right cupcake, and then the pattern starts over. So you have a left, a right, you get the drift. So you'll need to figure out how many cupcakes for your application. For me, I did this around the hem of the skirt, and each cupcake is about 2 3/4 inches wide, and my daughter's waist is a little under 20 inches these days. So if you multiply that by 3, the 20 inches by 3, you get 60 inches, and then you take the 60 inches and divide that by the 2 3/4 inches is a little over 21, which means I chose 21 cupcakes. And that works out nicely for me since 21 is divisible evenly by 3, and I'm using 3 colors in my pattern. I just love it when things work out, don't you? So from there, I'm pulling any of the dots that landed on my cupcake line out. Okay, I figure this kind of cleans up things, so the outline of the cupcake is kind of a clean shape without little fuzzies popping out, if that makes sense. And then I cut out each shape about 3/8 of an inch to maybe a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to be patting these cupcakes, the icing part of these cupcakes, so I need a good bit of allowance on the fabric fold. And finally, I put one clip at the place where the top icing swirl meets the bottom one, and this is going to allow my fabric to fold around that shape. And this whole process, especially if you're doing 21 of them or so like I am, becomes a little bit of an assembly line. And in my experience, whenever I'm doing work like this, it is most efficient to do all of one step at one time. You'll kind of get into a rhythm and you'll remember the details of each step, and then you'll have the right tools out at that time too. So just my 2 cents, but I prefer to complete each step before moving on to the next one. Just a little FYI, my 2 cents, if it helps y'all out. So then I take some paper safe scissors and I cut around the icing part of the cupcake. Basically, my quilting batting is kind of dense, and my light tracing board, as wonderful as it may be, has its limitations just like everything else. So since I can't see through it, my batting to trace the icing part, I'm going to cut it out and then trace around it and then, cut out my batting. Now I'm using this little nifty kind of a soldering iron thing, if you will, and while I do like it, you definitely do not need to buy it. Just be careful and use your iron. Either way, fold over the fabric and press it carefully into place. Now if you do have this little tool though, I recommend only using it on the medium setting since it can burn this fabric on the high setting. Ask me how I know. And then I take some finer weight thread and baste those little folds into place. Okay, so now I'm a little bit backtracking and I'm having to cut out my curves so I can trace them on top of the icing section. If I was smart and not sewing with babies attached to me all the time, I'm just going to blame them. Can we just do that? I would have done this part before cutting out any of the icing from the fabric, and I'll show that method for the bottom of the cupcake half because I was smarter that day. So anywho, what I'm trying to say is I cut the curve out so I can fit a pin, and I trace those curves into my icing shape. And then I take some white floche. I'm using floche here instead of floss since it doesn't have that little bit of texture that the floss has. It's just a very nice smooth fiber. But floss would work, but floss would work too. And like I say, it is sewing, so you do you. Regardless, I tie onto the back and then I work the back stitch to stitch those little icing curves. And when I'm all done with the first curve, I just drop down to the second curve and continue stitching. I didn't see any reason to tie off and then tie back on here. It really doesn't matter. I'm sorry. I know I got the kiddos in the background of this voiceover. It's my life. Welcome to it. I hope it's not too distracting. Then I moved on to making the bottom of the cupcakes. First, I traced all the shapes I needed. I referred to my list so I knew how much of each left and how much of each right-hand side cupcakes I needed for each color. Surprisingly, it was not that difficult to keep it straight, and even in a small sewing space with little ones floating around, everything stayed organized. I don't know, it was magic. So then I grabbed the flourish that coordinates to each fabric. I tried to pick colors of flourish that were just a shade or two different than the fabric color. That way the stitches would stand out a little bit while, still coordinating with the fabric, if that makes sense. And this is what I was referring to earlier. On this day, I got smarter. So I guess I had an appropriate amount of coffee, but I stitched all those little lines before cutting out any of those cupcake shapes. This is what I should have done with the icing sections too, but such is life. I used kind of bigger stitches here since I thought they looked a little bit better on this motif than tiny ones, but to each their own. It's sewing, you do you. So once I had those little lines stitched, then I cut the bottom of the cupcakes, and again I'm leaving some seam allowance since I'm going to fold the edge of that fabric under. And one last thing, although if you are using the same fabric as me, you could probably skip this, but I decided to put a piece of large cording behind each of those stitched lines. And I really liked the idea of giving some dimension behind these lines, but if you were using a lighter weight fabric, this probably would have worked lovely. But this fabric is a little bit on the heavier side, and I still love it. And I did put the cording behind all 21 cupcakes because why not? It's not like I'm limited on time or anything. But anywho, I use a sew line glue pen to do this, and like I said, I like the idea, just not really for this fabric. It's a little bit too heavy for them to poke through as much as I wanted, but I'm putting the idea out there in case you use a different kind of fabric. So once I had all my cupcakes pieces ready to assemble, then I pinned them to my dress hem, just kind of roughly pinned them in place to keeping the order of the left, right, and all that sort of stuff, and all the colors. And then I realigned each cupcake before I sewed that individual one to my dress. So in my case, it's rather easy to use the fabric to keep things in alignment since there's this large weave pattern in my fabric. But otherwise, you could use a measuring tape. So I pinned the icing section of the cupcake in place first, and then the bottom of the cupcake in place second. And then I grabbed some DMC 50 weight thread and anchored that on by going through my fabric once and then through it again to create a loop, and then twisted my needle around that loop twice and pulled it through to create a knot. And from there, I just whip stitch the bottom part of the cupcake onto the fabric. I go around that bottom edge of the cupcake first, just grabbing a little bit of fabric at a time, and then I go across the bottom edge of that icing part, and finally I go across the top edge of the icing part of the cupcake. There are so many different ways to do this, and I'm not saying that mine is the best, but I know that if I don't show it, then people will ask, so that's how I did it. And there you go, all of my cupcakes lined up in a row. I hope this video was helpful. If y'all have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.